Let's talk about, the things that we all are probably facing or probably aware of that's been kind of plaguing us from a marketing perspective, but the challenges that recruiting companies could face as we approach and head into 2025. Em, do you want to kick us off with some of those?
Yeah. So some of the things, there's a lot of things that may seem more important than just marketing, right? As we go into 2025, we've got the election, the economy, the job market, AI taking over our jobs, all these things that we've been talking about today. And although they don't really seem connected, effective branding and marketing can really help overcome these challenges. So, just to go into these a little bit more, we've got competitive noise. Like it's really hard to cut through all that clutter anymore. And this is getting harder and harder every day as there's more content and just more people out there putting their messages out. It's also really hard to prioritize strategies and tactics. What is going to make the most impact, especially as we're bringing new things into the mix? It can be really hard to prioritize those. Another struggle can be measuring success. How do we know that what we are doing is actually helping? How can we get it all done? Where can you focus? Where do you need to focus your time? All of these things really take away from the focus of what we need to be doing. It really can kind of add to that confusion.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, what's interesting about all of this, right? As we go through this list of things that are challenges, and we look at the struggles that we may face based off of any of these different things that we've listed here. On the flip side of that, and we'll get into this a little bit though as well, a lot of these things become opportunities, which is really, really interesting to me. It's because we talk about things like we look at the noise that's in the marketplace right now. And we look at how so many people are active on these different platforms. At least it feels like they are. But the opportunity for us to be able to use more tools or more platforms and more resources to create information ourselves to be a part of, and I don't want to say part of that noise, but maybe to cut through that noise becomes an opportunity that exists.
Right. So with some of these tools and technology and a lot of them we've already talked about today, it allows us to be, better at what we're trying to do from a marketing standpoint, better segmentation, better analytics, tracking and data, faster content creation, faster research, all these things that used to take, hours and hours, weeks, months to figure out, to learn about, to produce, we can now do it at a much, much faster rate and to scale.
Right. And so the resources even beyond things like technology. I mean, those of us that are in the industry and I've been around now about 15 years in the industry, worked a desk myself for about 7 years, but it didn't seem like if you didn't go to conferences, it felt like you were kind of distant from other recruiters, right? Maybe you had your team that you were a part of, those kind of things. But now such an opportunity of those resources to learn, coaches that are very prevalent within the industry, owner to owner type groups, being able to access these things at your fingertips, even things like Facebook groups, Reddit forums, LinkedIn. I mean, the community that the industry and the recruiting industry has created for us to learn from each other is far greater than it's ever been. And that's such a great asset as we look at the opportunities to be able to take our marketing efforts and the things that we can do to be able to elevate them for our brand and for our organization.
Yeah. So really what this says to us is that the playing field has never been more level. Today, success isn't dependent on size like it has been in the past. Those small organizations, small companies really can play and hang with the big guys. This isn't necessarily something that you are excluded from just because maybe you're a single person desk.
Yeah, we used to think that marketing was only for those guys, and I'm not going to mention those guys, but you all know who I'm talking about, right? Everyone knows who I'm thinking of right now. But it's not that anymore. You can be a guy or gal or person in your basement, and you can be able to invest in the same technologies and the same resources, be able to have your hand on the same knowledge that those guys can get a hold of now. And be able to take advantage of those assets and those tools to be able to be very, very effective in what you're doing when you're looking for those right kind of candidates for your clients, and then also looking for those next opportunities for those candidates that you're working with.
So what we're planning to talk about today are some of the best practices for marketing as a recruiter. And so really the kind of, as Steve and I were talking about how to present this, we wanted to present it in a way that's really less about some of the specific tactics that you can take, which we will mention some of those. And some of them have already been mentioned today. Several of our presenters have already touched on and really stolen some of my words directly out of my presentation today. It was very upsetting. But it's really great, though, because it's reinforcing some of these ideas. But what we really wanted to talk about today is the mindset that you need to keep in order to recognize some of these opportunities and paths toward marketing success as they pop up.
Yeah, because I know there's people on this seminar right now or on this webinar, and they're the ones, and I'm not going to call you out. So I want you to just think introspectively now of yourself and kind of consider what I'm going to say here. You think that marketing doesn't work. You think that your website's completely a necessary evil and it doesn't add any value to what it is that you do. And you think those things. But I want you to maybe start thinking differently about that. Not to steal Apple's mantra there, but you know, we're going to challenge that a little bit, because you're right. If you think that way, if you think you can't get anything out of marketing, if you think that your website is just there as a brochure and you really can't aid in any type of lead generation or any help for your business, then that's what you're going to get. I have people tell me all the time, Steve, I've never gotten anything out of my website. And I go to their website and it hasn't been updated in 10 years. It's not even mobile responsive. It looks terrible. It doesn't even represent the industries that they serve. Of course, you didn't get anything out of that website. But if you start altering the way that we think, all of us collectively, and thinking about how actually we can use these tools and these resources, marketing efforts, websites, to be able to start getting the most out of what we do as an organization, to speed up our processes, to have us reach the best candidates, to be able to differentiate ourselves in a way that our competitors aren't doing, all of a sudden it becomes something that's very, very, very valuable to your organization, and something that you really can't live without. And so that's kind of what we're wanting to challenge and think about. And also, before we move forward, you can say be real. You can keep that there, because I'm being real right now.
You're being very real.
But one of the things that you want to be able to think about is that 80-20 rule, right? So all these things that we're giving you, and even though all these tools are accessible and everything's available to you and is at your fingertips and all the things we're discussing here, most people are not using them. Most people are not doing it because they're that same person, like some of you may be, that say, this doesn't work, or there's no reason for me to utilize this. So if you have 80% of the people out there, and I bet it's higher than that aren't doing these things, and the top 20% that are really making an impact on their business, you know, start thinking about ways that, and as we get through this presentation, ways that you can maybe adapt some of this to become that top 20%. And I promise you, whether it's something that you're implementing yourself, you're using an outside firm, whatever it may be, if you start making those little changes, it's going to pay major dividends in the way that your firm can be represented and the business that you can develop and revenue that you can generate for your organization. So that's my soapbox. We can go on in.
We can go ahead and go ahead. Start with this one. Talk about Be Real.
So be real, okay? Just don't try to be something you're not. I think that's one of the hardest things. You see all these people out there putting out content and putting information in place, and there's this desire to mimic it because it's worked for them, or even they're selling the idea that, well, because it worked for me, this is exactly the path that you have to take. And there may be some truth to that. Obviously, some fundamentals that we're going to be going through here as well, and some things that we're putting into place. But you want to be yourself. You want to be your firm. You want to be who you are in the marketplace, because that's what makes you different. That's what makes you unique. And that actually allows you to stand out and build upon a brand that you're not trying to force. Because when something's forced, it's very, very difficult to continue and keep that momentum. And so, you know, just try to find, and there's ways to do this, and we'll talk about this, but who you are and how to implement that through those different mediums that are available to us.
Yeah. So one of the first things here, and I was really glad to hear Dan Mori touched on this as well, but, you know, making sure that you know who you are and are realistic about who you are. You need to do a real assessment of your place in the market. And then think about, do your ideal clients actually know who you are? Do they actually know you? Everybody, you know, you may feel like everybody knows who you are. You've been putting content out, you've been doing stuff for a long time, but realistically, how many people actually know who you are? And some of that starts with, you know, establishing your mission, your vision, your values, and really honing in on who you are before you start anything else. Because if that foundation isn't set, everything you put out will be disjointed. It'll be very easy to get off track, to pursue things that really don't make sense for what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I had a friend in the industry tell me one time, and this is a gentleman that took his business from I think it was roughly, and this is kind of rough numbers, but somewhere around that $7 to $10 million range, and then tripled it over a course of 3 years. What he said to me, and what was the trigger of this, was that he thought he had done such a good job marketing his business for the last 20 years to the staffing and recruiting industry that everyone knew who he was. But the moment that he took that away and said, you know what, maybe people don't actually know who I am, and started being able to be more proactive in what it is that they did, and the way that they started marketing their firm, it instantly changed his business. And so, those are things that we want to think about: is how do we make sure that people understand who the real version of our organization is? Like Em said, being able to implement that's bold statements, the expertise, what we bring to the table within our website, that our SEO is able to reflect what we need people to find us for. We want to look beyond. If I'm more of a specific recruiter, let's say in the, I don't know, renewables industry, but I'm trying to rank for recruiters as a whole, and I have nothing on my website that's specific about that or answers the questions that someone may be looking for when looking for a renewable recruiter, then I'm not getting the most out of that SEO and the way that my website is optimized and even speaking to those audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll let you take social media.
Yeah. So from a social media perspective, and really this comes from, us working with AI and a lot of different things. It has so many great, applications, and it can really, really help you do these things. But again, coming back to, if you don't know who you are, then anything that, even if you're using AI to help you create things, it also doesn't know who you are. So anything it puts out is going to be just like anybody else who put the same prompts into it. So thinking about when you're putting out content, whether that's on social media or on your website, in interviews, whatever it is that you're looking for those opportunities, make sure that you show your personality. Let your personality, your individual humanness shine through the photos, the videos, the words that you're saying. If you write something, or you have chat write something for you, and it doesn't sound like something that would come out of your mouth, then redo it. That means it wasn't good. It means it was somebody else's. You're building somebody else's brand, the robot version of yourself. And nobody wants that. It could take over, right? But you want to be really authentic in all of those things. And you also want to build your personal brand. Your personal brand is what makes you different from any other recruiter out there, right? Like, that's where that difference lies, is what you bring to the table as a person. From an advertising perspective, we want to look at this, as you know, taking on that part about being genuine. You don't need to be somebody you're not. And you don't have to be the company for every client. So from an advertising perspective, that means that you really need to segment your audience. If you're just saying, it's all employers in the blue collar industry, maybe, then that's not really segmented enough. You need to be saying that, it's employers who are they're in HVAC and plumbing, and they're looking to grow, and maybe they're at this level of revenue. They have this size employee, but these kinds of things that really segment who it is that you are targeting on, because that's who's going to resonate with the services that you provide. And then make sure that you're telling your story. Don't just sell. Tell your story, and let that experience that you have and that you bring to the table help sell for you.
Right. And if anyone's followed Haley Marketing for any length of time, you've probably seen this marketing pyramid, and the aspect of how that relates to establishing that who you are, your mission, your vision, your core values, then how that leads to your messaging, to your website sales collateral, to all the information that you're putting out, and then ultimately to the mouths of your sales team and your recruiters. And so, just think about building that foundation and how that affects everything, and that authenticity that you're creating within who you are as an organization, what your purpose is, and what you're trying to accomplish.
Exactly.
Be adventurous.
Go ahead.
No, I was being adventurous, Em, and getting in front of you with that.
We probably should have practiced like the back and forth a little bit more.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to try new things. This is something that I think that we all get ourselves into. We have this mindset of whether it's imposter syndrome, or whether it's just the fear of not getting the most out of it, wasting an investment, not wanting to commit the time to it. There's so many things that we could take advantage of if we're just willing to try.
So some of those best practices as we think about this more practically is, from your website, be adventurous in the way that your website is actually put together. Push the envelope with the design and the copy. Again, coming back to it, the established persona of who you are and your mission and vision and values, make sure that that is demonstrated in the design and copy of your website, and really reflected there. I'm going to let you talk about asynchronous selling.
Yeah, and from the perspective of the website, so we have so many people come to us that will say, especially when we're doing one of our custom websites, they'll say, Steve, I want to be different. I want my website really to push the envelope and really represent who we are. And we say, that's awesome, because we like to make websites that look really, really unique within the industry. And we go about and we do that, and we implement those designs, we lay it all out. And then eventually, after all the feedback and all the revisions and all the things, it ends up looking more similar to the competitors or other websites that we see kind of commonly within the industry. And so don't be afraid to be unique in the way that you represent that website, and be a little bit adventurous in that design, that structure. There's a lot of really cool things that can be done right now that can help set you apart. Same thing from an SEO perspective. Being able to get the most out of different new technology that's being created. Some of these things can be scary, especially when we talk about AI. But we've seen some really, really great tools that we've been able to develop ourselves personally and use for our clients that allow us to be a little adventurous in the way that we're using that tool to create SEO and create volume and depth from content perspective, whether it's our Title Scribe product or our product that we have the talent pages, where we're building these out and increasing the SEO value of a website through that AI generator and using content to be able to create that depth. So don't be scared of using other tools to be able to get the most out of SEO. Social media. So different platforms, right? LinkedIn's it. If I'm on LinkedIn all the time, the whole world's on LinkedIn all the time, right? Probably not. If they're not a recruiter, if they're not a hiring manager, if they're not in HR, they're probably not spending the 8 hours a day, the 15 hours a day that we're all spending on LinkedIn. Where else are they? They could be on Reddit, they could be on Instagram, they could be on TikTok. Are there ways to be able to get the most out of those platforms for your recruiting firm, and to be able to expand your reach by being just a little adventurous in the way that you're creating that content? Even how you're being adventurous in the way you're creating content on LinkedIn. Videos is very, very impactful right now with that information, that content, and the media that can be created there. And I know a lot of us are scared. I hate it. I hate seeing myself on video and putting that out there. But there is some really, really great value to the way that the algorithms read that content and be able to push it out, and in the way that people digest it because of the other platforms that are available to us.
Yeah. And then the next part of that is get your team involved. So if you do have a team that you work with, really lean on those colleagues to help get your message out there. And all of these things need to trickle down to your recruiters, to your team there, making sure that they're producing content that again resonates with themselves. So it is again real to them, as well as being real to the company they're representing. But every time you add more people into the mix, you have that many more opportunities to get seen, to be found by other people, to have those connections. You guys know this. This is how you do your jobs, right? From a candidate perspective, like this is how you get in touch with people, is those networks. But use that network to also put your message out there. From an advertising perspective, the same as your organic social media. Maybe try other formats. If you've always done a search campaign on Google, like a Google search ad, and it's just kind of like hanging out there, kind of stagnant, you're not seeing a lot of growth from it, take a step back, take a look. Are there other options? Are there other places where your target audience that you've already identified, right? Like, because you know who you are and what you're trying to accomplish, who you're trying to talk to, but are there other places where they might be more likely to be receptive of those messages that you're putting out there? So things like streaming audio and video, specialized social networks. There's a lot of opportunities out there that didn't exist 5-10 years ago. Before, you had to be at a $10,000 a month budget in order to place ads on streaming audio or video. That's not the case anymore. You can start with usually around that $500 a month ad spend to really try some of these more specialized and more unique and the newer technologies, right? So it's out there and it's open to people at almost every level now.
Yeah. So I think this next one's probably my favorite one, because I think it's the most attainable, because you can control this yourself, and just being able to be consistent in what you're putting together and how you're approaching the market. If we can't control anything, I can control my actions, right? I can set my schedule. I can put it in place for me to be able to approach whether I'm creating, again, you can go push forward, whether I'm creating content on my website consistently, have a plan in place, whether I'm adding more depth to my website to be able to focus on SEO. If I'm looking at keywords, I'm tracking those things, setting a frequency to social media and how I need to be able to post on that. And then just being able to commit to, okay, in the next year, I'm going to commit X amount of dollars to my advertising and my budget to be able to get that ad spend out there, and not recoiling or not being consistent in the way that you're approaching that, because you're just you're not wanting to you're not willing to commit to those results. It's like anything in life, right? Whether we're on a diet, whether we're on a workout regimen, whether we're doing anything from a self-improvement perspective or just developing a skill, practicing a sport, whatever we did as we're growing up and things that we can continue to do as our hobbies as adults, you have to be consistent in what you do to be able to get the most out of whatever you're trying to accomplish.
As we were putting this together, I said, marketing needs to be thought of as a lifestyle. This isn't a quick fix. You need to really commit to this, and this is what you do every day. So again, make sure that what you're committing to is also realistic, because if it's not realistic, then you are going to quit. And it's the same with every diet, with every exercise plan. Do something that's actually attainable.
Yeah, and the thing with this is, so I always use this the example of recruiters. So when I was recruiting, we always at 4:00, I always planned no matter what. We sat down, we made sure that we had an opportunity to be able to, for the next hour, plan my next day. And that was something we consistently did every single day. And if we did that, it made us a successful recruiter. So the same concept. Plan, take a time for your week, whether it's each day, whether it's once a week, to plan for these things so it becomes predictable and allows you to be consistent. So be adaptable. As we all know, the market doesn't stay the same, whether over the course of a couple of years or whether it's something that happens in the course of months. So we have to be able and nimble enough to be able to change how we represent ourselves and who we're representing ourselves to. And so being able to adjust your website, being able to add new industries, think about the kind of nuances or sub niches of your core industry, how you speak to those different audiences, being able to adapt your SEO, creating new content, adjusting meta titles and meta descriptions, putting together new types of social media because it's changed completely. Rolling with the idea that TikTok came about. So rather than neglect it, be adaptable, adjust, and utilize that. Don't be scared of those things and just stay in our own ways, but find things that people are doing to be able to adjust to that. And that same aspect of advertising information and data, being able to be able to adapt based off of results, analytics. Take a quarterly review of all that you're doing and being able to then say, okay, what's working, what's not, and then adjust. Just because you planned a budget for the year, or just because you planned a certain initiative for the year, if it's not working, you don't have to continue doing it if you have those reviews in place. Or if it's working wonderfully and you think you can get more out of it, just because you set a certain budget, why would you not invest more in that to be able to get the most out of it? So being able to adapt and progress and grow as the year goes on in 2025 to get the most out of all those different elements and platforms that are available to us from a digital presence perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the last part that we had kind of talked about was, the ability to be very nimble in changing, maybe even from a website content or your messaging content. So making sure that you're able to easily switch, or that you're not ignoring maybe one part of, if you're focused on business development right now, make sure you're also not ignoring those candidates, and then vice versa. If you're focused on drawing candidates in right now, don't let your business development side falter, because at any point in time it could switch. And we saw during the pandemic and following the pandemic, people who weren't focused on making sure that both of their audiences were being taken care of, and then had to very quickly switch gears. And some of that was very hard to do and very expensive to do whenever you invested everything in one side or the other.
Yeah, you can go to the next slide, but I'm going to make that point as well, because I think that's extremely important from the perspective of we were preaching, don't neglect clients. Just because you have clients coming to you now, don't neglect them. This is the time that they're willing to have the conversations, to be able to talk with you. They're welcoming recruiters. And so many people did. And then they found themselves this year with no job orders, and HR managers and hiring managers wouldn't speak to them. And and now they have all the candidates they want. So don't let the same thing happen from the perspective if candidates are reaching out to you, cultivate those relationships, be able to get them into your network, provide value to them. And then when that comes back around, you become the resource that they want to use. And so, don't silo yourself, be able to adapt to those things as the market changes.